Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to be able to be here with you and listen to the ever-dynamic Kameli Mbatiweti, who was, I was with him together as a student at Levuka Public School. We were boarding when we were in primary school. He came all the way from New Hebrides at that time to come and have education in Fiji. So I always feel reinvigorated whenever I'm in his presence. And I'm sure you get the same yourself, the way that he's so upbeat about everything. But today, I've been asked to speak about the topic of health. It's such a broad topic. It's such a big topic. So, as you all know, I'm not a health specialist, but I've come to learn about it. But I think it's something that's critical for all of us in HR, because in HR, you're talking about dealing with the people that work for your organization, your most important asset in your organization. Basically, the fountainhead of productivity in an organization. Everything that happens, or if it happens well, or if it does not happen well, it depends on the people in your organization. It depends on what they can do, what they know, what they want to do, and what their body or their emotional well-being allows them to do. And that's what health is all about. So today, I hope I figure out how to do this thing. Gadgets, okay, that way. No. Okay. That's what was. First of all, I just want to talk about the concept of health itself. What are we talking about health? As I was getting ready for this presentation, I came across this. I'm not too sure how to pronounce this word, H-O-E-L-T-H, but this seems to be the source of the word health. I shall assume that you can pronounce it as HOELF. And it basically talks about soundness. So when people talked about health initially, they were talking about human beings being sound, the soundness of the body. This was the original concept of health. We just looked at the soundness of the body. Now, initially, when people thought about health, they thought that health was something that was just given to you by the divine nature. God gave you health, or God took away health. The first person that started really analyzing health to see where health comes from, by observation and by looking at things happen around us, was a very famous person. Oh, I keep pressing the wrong way. Very famous person that you might have heard of. His name is now taken for the oath that the doctors use. He was called Hippocrates. Not a hypocrite, but Hippocrates. Hippocrates was the person who started looking at health by making observations about the kinds of things that impact on health. And Hippocrates, back in many, many thousands of years ago, he found some things about health. And he emphasized three aspects of health. He believed that health was a function of environmental sanitation, the environment around you. If you have a good environment, you're more likely you have a greater propensity to have good health. If your environment is, if there's good sanitation. Secondly, he thought about personal hygiene. If you keep yourself clean, you look after yourself, then it's more likely that you have health. Then he had this third idea. He had the idea of balanced diets. Very interesting, eh? Because this, after all the thousands of years of thinking about health, we have come to realize that this is still the most important thing to do with health. It is what you put into your mouth. That is the ultimate determinant of health, other than the infectious diseases. Because in this country, as you well know, the biggest challenge to health is not infectious diseases, but non-communicable diseases, where the things that you put into your mouth are very important. This is what he said. He talked about balanced diet, and he made this statement many thousands of years ago. His statement was, "Let food be thy medicine, and let thy medicine be food." And in Fiji, if there's one message in health that people need to really consider seriously, that is that same message that Hippocrates talked about all those many years ago. Most important medicine is what you put into your mouth that you eat. If you eat lots of vegetables, you will have a good health. If you eat with a lot of butter and salts and sugars and cholesterol and too much red meat and all of this, what happens to you? You become unhealthy. That adage has never changed. But that was his basic idea in the Hippocrates that he came up many thousands of years ago. The World Health Organization, which basically is the granddaddy organization in relation to health, it defined health in its constitution back in 1948. And this is the kind of concepts that they put into the definition of health. Health, if you look at that definition, The first is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. You see, normally when we think about health, we just think of that you're only healthy when you're not sick. But this definition says being healthy is more than just not being sick, right? The absence of disease or infirmity. It says health is more than just not being sick, not more than just the absence of disease and infirmity. But really, health is about a state of complete, a number of things it says. Physical, how your body is. Is your body good or is your body not working? Is something wrong with your body? Not only physical, but mental, how you are thinking. Mental. And social, how well you are interacting with everybody. Because all of these things, they impact on your health and your life. What happens to you physically, what happens to you mentally, what happens to you emotionally, what happens to you socially. They all have an impact on your health and how you interact. Some people don't really like this. A lot of people have been critics of this definition because they say it's almost utopian. You know, that word complete, there's no point in this thing. I can't point at the screen here. But can you see the word complete? Can you see the word complete? When it says complete, that means it's not 99% or not 98%. It's what? 100%. So I say that's almost utopian. Nobody can be in a complete state. You know, a state where you have a completely physical, mental, and social well-being. So they say it's almost utopian. But I think it's a good ideal for us to aim for, to be in that state. So a healthy person is a person that is that you can see he captures all of those things that are there. So that's basically health. So to be a really healthy person, it's a state. Some people have also said that definition of health is more like a definition of happiness rather than being healthy. Almost like a definition of being happiness. But let's just go with it, that's the definition. That's what the World Health Organization, which is the organization that runs health in the world, has decided should be the definition, and that is what we'll work on. One of the things, I think, for all of us as human resource professionals, we always believe that there is a link. We believe that there's a link between health and productivity. Is that something you believe? Yes. But sometimes we ask people, is there any scientific evidence of the fact that there is a link between health and productivity? Because a lot of times when you talk about training, for instance, we believe that training leads to better productivity. Is that something that you believe? Is it something that's easy to prove at the level of outcomes? At the level of results? Is it something easy to prove? Yes or no? Not very easy to prove, Not very easy to prove the link empirically. So what I did when I looked at this, I thought, just look at some of the studies that I could find. Is there a link between health and productivity? Common sense says yes. Your most important asset in your organization is human beings. If they're healthy, of course, your productivity is going to go up. If they're not healthy, well, the productivity is going to go down. But I did look at some studies. I did look at this particular study by this person called Cole. And he looked at very poor countries. Is there a relationship between health and the total factor productivity? I won't go into total factor productivity. But basically, he found that there was a definite relationship between health factors and TFP at a macro-national level. TFP, or total factor productivity, when you are trying to grow an economy, normally when you start growing the economy, the more resources you put into the economy, the more growth that you get. But TFP is the knowledge element, or the efficiency element on how you use those resources. That's what's reflected in TFP. So what he is saying, that health is one of the factors that leads to a better utilization of resources. So there is a definite relationship, according to him, at national level between health and the total factor productivity of an organization, of a country, sorry. There was another study that I looked at by this group of people. This is very interesting. This study is going to be very interesting for us here as human resource professionals. This person, Lobke and his team, they were trying to look at health-related lost productivity. What is the productivity that you lose because people are not well in an organization? And they looked at 10 employers, about 51,000 people, and they used this questionnaire that has been designed by the World Health Organizations. It's called a Health and Work Performance Questionnaire that people self-fill to self-assess whether they're being as productive as possible in the workplace during the time that they're there or not. They also, you know, in the United States, a lot of the companies, they pay for the medical costs of their employees. And probably in your organizations too, they do that. A lot of you are coming from organizations like that. Now that I'm a government employee, I have to pay for my own medical costs. But before, we used to do that. So they also wanted to look at how much money these companies were paying for the medical expenses of their employees. They tried to also analyze the associations of health conditions, whether you are healthy, with the rise of absenteeism and presenteeism. Presenteeism, you are familiar with this term? When you are present, but you cannot give your 100%. Yeah? So they looked at these relationships. One of the things that I found interesting from this study was that they were able to calculate that for the companies in America, they spent approximately $13,000 per employee per year on total direct and indirect health-related costs. That's quite a lot. But aside from that fact, the interesting, I wish I had a pointer. I can't have a pointer. Okay. If you look at, if I point at this thing, you won't see it up there. You'll see the title of this particular slide. It says, from this study, the top 10 health conditions by annual medical drug absenteeism, presenteeism cost per 1,000 full-time employees. Look at the scale at the bottom. The black thing, all that black thing is the medical cost. That is the cost of the medicines. This is the cost of absenteeism. This is the cost of presenteeism. So you look at all of these things for different types of disease that they have in this company, depression, obesity, what's that one? I can't read it properly. Arthritis, so forth and so forth. You see an interesting thing. In all of these, for instance, for depression, the cost of medicines is only that much. For the medical, for seeing the doctor, for seeing the doctor is that much. The cost of the drugs is that much. But look at the cost of absenteeism. But look at the cost of presenteeism. And look at the ratio between these two and that much. Can you see that? You see the massive impact of cost of absenteeism and presenteeism on all of these areas. Depression is obviously like that. But then you have things like obesity. You don't really think about obesity. But look at obesity, the cost of that. But look at the impact of obesity to the organization in dollars and cents. Not just the medicine, but the greater proportion of the impact of presenteeism and absenteeism. Can you see that? And it goes all the way through. In some, like, what's this one? Cancer. In some cancers, obviously, the cost is higher in terms of seeing the doctors, and the cost of absenteeism is far less, and the cost of presenteeism is far less. But all along, generally, what you're seeing is a greater proportion of the cost to the organization in terms of its productivity is the indirect cost of absenteeism and also of presenteeism. So this has a dramatic impact on the productivity of the organization. And you look at the ratios, obviously see from here for depression, this is almost 80% absenteeism and presenteeism. And presenteeism here is almost 50% of the total cost of depression. That means they're physically in the workplace, but they're not able to give their 100% to do the things that they're supposed to do. I think that's the first message that came through from this study. The extent of not only the fact that there's so much from the indirect cost, but the extent of it. It's not like 1-to-1. According to this study, it's more 2.3-to-1. Right? From the direct cost to the indirect cost. So the impact is far more on the indirect cost, the great cost of presenteeism. That gives us an important challenge as HR practitioners, because obviously you need to manage it. But you know the adage in management, if you cannot measure it, you can't manage it. The things that you cannot measure, you cannot manage. So there's a challenge for HR practitioners. How do you then measure these things so you can start managing it? How do you start measuring it and start identifying if there are specific groups or for specific diseases or for specific ethnicities or specific geographical distributions of people where presenteeism or absenteeism is high? If you can get that data, then you can start honing in on the causes and then start addressing some of these concerns. That I think is one of the most important things that comes through from this particular study. This was something that they said there. Health-related productivity costs significantly greater than medical and pharmacist costs. And they talked about chronic conditions, depression, anxiety, obesity, arthritis, back neck pain. These are all causes of productivity loss. And the last bullet point there is also interesting. It says executives and managers experience as much or more monetized productivity loss from depression and back pain as laborers and operators. So it's not just the people at the bottom who walk around like this. It's also people at the top who probably, I don't know what they do, probably use the wrong kind of seats or do things that they're not supposed to do. That's why they have back pains and things, just like everybody else. It's something that impacts on everybody across the whole spectrum of the organization. So basically, this is the linkage. It says that there's a strong link between health and productivity from the few studies that I saw there. And I think if there's one point that comes through for HR professionals, we need to look if we can map up the linkage or map the data on productivity and also on workplace health, human capital investment, so we can try to improve that particular area. I also found some very interesting stats in relation to these areas of presentism. These are some of the things that from this group here, Hertz, Unger, and McDonald. They said that they found that obese workers experience significantly, not small, significantly, keyword, significantly higher rates of work limitations compared to normal weight workers. Dow Chemicals found for all chronic conditions, costs of presenteeism outweighed costs of absenteeism and medical costs combined except for diabetes cases. And look at these last two ones. These last two ones shocked me. HBR, Harvard Business Review, world famous name. They says that lost productivity due to presenteeism, to actually being at work, is 7.5 times higher than that of absenteeism and 3 times higher than that spent on medical costs. That's very high. And this unit from the UK, they says that presenteeism may be 50% to 500% greater than estimates of cost based on absenteeism alone. So there is a link, and I think the great challenge in HR is absenteeism and presenteeism because of health issues. That's something that needs to be managed well. Now, let's move on to health trends. Okay, this is a measure that we use in health to try to estimate what is the impact of people being sick or people being disabled as a result. Not disabled, but having some disability as a result of something impacting on their health. Disability-adjusted life years is a summary measure of the burden of diseases, and it captures two things. It captures the measure of the years of life that people lose as a result of something happening to them, or which is called the YLL, years of life lost. And the second component of this is the years of life lived with disability. So when you add those two up, the YLL and the YLD, you get the DALY, which is the disability-adjusted life years. So it gives us an estimate of what the impact of diseases is on the people and their mortality and how well they're able to function. In Fiji, you look at these are causes of premature death. Premature death is people dying before the age of 70. Now, the Bible says we should live until 70. In Fiji, unfortunately, the life expectancy now is lower than 70. It's 69. In a lot of other countries, even in the Pacific, their life expectancy is higher than us. So we've got a challenge there, something that we need to address. But looking at these ones, on the ones that you have on your left is the figures for 1990, and you can see there the biggest killers or the biggest diseases that led to the highest years of life lost. In 1990, the top level was ischemic heart disease, then we had stroke, then we had lower respiratory infections, preterm birth complications, and diabetes. The ones in blue are non-communicable diseases. Ones in blue are non-communicable diseases. The ones in red are communicable diseases, and the others are sort of injuries and things like that. You see the green is drowning and self-harm. But you'll notice that in 1990, the major killer, the top two were non-communicable diseases, then the next two were communicable diseases, then there was diabetes. But you will see the big jump that diabetes took. Diabetes is winning this race of destroying people. As you can see, diabetes jumped from here, number 5, right up to number 2 in the year 2010. So right now, the biggest killers in Fiji, of things leading to years of life lost, are heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. And then we have lower respiratory infections, preterm, and then we have all of these other congenital anomalies and chronic kidney disease. This chronic kidney disease has jumped up from here, and of course, kidney disease is very closely related to diabetes. Because whenever you have something that's wrong with your sugar in your blood, it's going to impact on your kidneys, and that's going to have, as soon as diabetes goes up, kidney go up, and when diabetes also happens, you have problems too with TB. So the biggest killers that are happening now, as you can see from here, the top 3 are things that are non-communicable diseases and things that are challenging us. If you go back to the definition by Hippocrates, what did Hippocrates say? Let what be thy food? Yeah, medicine be thy food and food thy medicine. Or should be the other way around. Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And if you look to the causes of a lot of these things, whether it's ischemic heart disease, diabetes, and stroke, big cause of that is food. Big cause of that is food that people believe in. But this is the challenge that we are having in Fiji. These are the killers that we have. There has been the surge of non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases, I've looked at the Hansard reports in Parliament. It is something that we've not just realized yesterday or last week. We've known about it for about 20 or 30 years. But the problem with non-communicable diseases is that the solutions to non-communicable diseases do not lie in the area of health. They lie in society. They lie in society in terms of societal norms, in terms of what is glamorous to eat, what is good things to eat, what are the good things to drink. What does a successful life mean? If you're successful in life, what does it mean? Does it mean that you should have more time to sit down all day and watch the TV? Is that a successful life? That concept of a successful life has to change. You see what I'm trying to get at? The answers are not in health itself. It's in the things that are upstream from health. What people choose to eat, how they choose to spend their time. These are the things that are important for us. And I think for all of us here, you're all in health. You look after the health of your workers. You want to make sure that you have a healthy workforce. Those are things that government is concerned about, and all of us as human resource professionals, because we care about the people that come to work in our organization, we have to have a care about those things, about what people are eating, what people are drinking, whether they're moving their bodies, whether they're getting enough rest, all the things that lead to this. Because this, in my mind, when I visited Japan recently, and I went to, what's this place called? Sendai, where they had, I went to Sendai and they showed me the mark of the tsunami. It was 7 meters, 7 meters. I was looking up to this, it was right, maybe up to that ceiling or higher than that ceiling. That was, and it impacted, it killed thousands of people. And in my mind, when I had a meeting with the Japanese, my counterpart, the minister, I said, in Fiji, the tsunami in Fiji is not this wave. The tsunami is this thing. This is our tsunami. The only difference, that tsunami that they had there, they had nothing that they could do about it. This tsunami, you and I, we can do something about it. We can do something about it in the confines of our own families. We can do something about it in the confines of our workplaces. What do we allow people to eat, how they work, what do they drink, how do they exercise? When we do all that, we can have impact on these areas. That's something that's very important. Now, let me move on. Okay, this slide, I probably need my glasses. Okay, I'll try. In this slide, we're looking at the trends in terms of what is, we're looking at the difference between 1990 and the year 2010. Going back to that slide, this slide here, looking at this change from here and looking at from this period to this period, what has increased, what has decreased. So if you looked, this first one, if you have the things that are above the line are the things that increase from 1990 to 2010. So you can see the first one is ischemic heart disease. It is above the line. It's above 0. That means from 1990 to 2010, it went up. And then the next one is diabetes, number 2. That means from 1990 to 2010, it increased. The third one is, what's the third one? Lower respiratory infections. It's below the line. That means from 1990 to 2010, its importance declined. Right? So from this graph, you can see what has become more of a problem for us in Fiji from 1990 to 2010. So you have all of these things. And you notice a few things. The blue ones are non-communicable diseases. All the blue ones are non-communicable diseases. The red ones are communicable diseases. Can you see some of the trends that seem to be happening? Generally, if you look above 0, is there more red there or more blue? More blue. It means what's increasing? Non-communicable diseases are increasing. If you look below the line, what is the color? It's more red. And there you can see the CD. The CDs are beginning to drop. That means, it doesn't mean that they're going away. It means that we're managing to manage better for them. We have better vaccinations. We have better sanitation. We are making sure that we kill the mosquitoes. We're cleaning up our grounds, all of those things. We are doing those things to try to get rid of these, what you call measles, dengue fever, and all of those things, the things that are communicable diseases. We have managed to deal with them. But our big problem is the things that are blue, that are above the line. And all of these are communicable diseases. So that's the first trend. Communicable disease and the impact is going down. Secondly, non-communicable diseases is going up. And the third one, that's very important, the green. Is communicable disease going away? Okay. The third one that is going up, the injuries. People are getting more road accidents. Maybe we got more cars. And also not just road accidents, but also people injuring themselves. Suicide and all those things. People cutting themselves and doing all kinds of things to themselves. That is the trend that's happening in terms of the health in Fiji. So as a result of this, we still, if you look at this, what does it mean in terms of policy? It means we must still maintain our efforts on the communicable diseases, make sure we keep them under control, but we really have to jack up our efforts on the non-communicable diseases. Diabetes, the heart problems, the strokes, the cancers, and all of these things. We really have to jack up our efforts, and that is what government is focused on now. Okay, this particular slide, this is another one, because now we're not just going from the diseases, we're going to the things that are risk factors for the disease. Now, on the vertical axis, you have a lot of the risk factors. You see the top risk factor on the vertical axis? There is high body mass. What's that? Dietary, sugar in your blood, blood pressure, smoking. I smoked for more than 30 years. Really knows, but I finally gave it up. Not good for you. Physical inactivity and so forth. These are the things that are risk factors. And the colors here are for different types of disease. This one here, that's blue, eh? Is it cardio? It's for heart. And that green, I think it's for this one, diabetes, eh? So what this graph, if you look at this graph, and this one here, this light blue, I think it's cancer here, cancer. That's cancer, then that is cardio, that is diabetes. So it's a high body mass index. When you have a high body mass index, it has a great impact in terms of diabetes and in terms of cardio. If you look at this one here, what's this? Dietary. Dietary has a big impact on cancer, on cardio, very huge one, and then on diabetes. What's this? Sugar in the blood. Big impact on cardio, big impact on, what's this green one? Diabetes, and so forth. High blood pressure, see the same thing again. And you can see that these two here are almost the same. Eh? High body mass index and dietary, they're almost the same thing. They remind us again of the wisdom of that person, Hippocrates, because that's all about food. Eh? It's all about what you eat. It's the importance of food. It is coming through again. The biggest diseases are non-communicable diseases. The biggest things that we have to watch out for, that we have to manage, is body mass index and what you put in, and the importance of all of these, high-risk factors. These things are coming through, and it's something that all of us need to pay attention to. We must begin to manage better for all of these areas. This was a slide that was explained to me by the doctors, especially in relation to diabetes. Things like diabetes, when diabetes rises, it's not something that's just bad for diabetes alone. Diabetes has an impact. They call it, the doctors have taught me these things, the impact on the snake. When diabetes happens, it has an impact on your skin. It can lead to all kinds of skin complications. Then it has an impact on your nerves. It can affect all your nerves. There's all kinds of nerval type things that go wrong with the body when diabetes is high. Then it has impact on your arteries. Then it has also impact on your kidneys. It impacts on your eyes. So when you have a rising in diabetes, it's going to have an impact all over the body. And what is the risk? What is the biggest, if you go back to the slides that you had before, if you want to control diabetes, there are two types of diabetes. One kind, you can't really type 1. But type 2 diabetes, you can do a lot of things to manage it by just managing the sugar levels in your blood, which is a function, once again, of what you put into your mouth and how you move your body. That you can control. You're getting the point that I'm trying to make, yeah? If you don't control it, diabetes is not just diabetes itself. It has an impact on kidney, brain, eye, everywhere. On your blood vessels, stroke, heart, everything. It impacts on everything. The body is systemic. Everything is connected. You tweak something here, something goes wrong there, it has impacts all over. Now that diabetes is rising so dramatically, it's something that we must pay a lot of attention to. You and I, the whole of society in Fiji, must be able to do that. And if you look at that slide that I showed before, these are what the Ministry of Health regards as the top risk factors that we must manage, we must try to control in this country to better improve your workforce, to better improve the population. Smoking, nutrition, alcohol. Yangon, they don't have any studies on it, but you and I know probably it does have some impact. Eh? And the last one is physical inactivity. And these are things we can do something about. I know a lot of your organizations are involved in this, involved in doing that, and something we must continuously do more about to get this. We must deal with the risk factors, try to address the risk factors so we can minimize the impact on the rest of us. I don't have a watch. How much time do I have? 15. 1-5. Oh, I better speed up. Eh? This is another interesting slide, especially when you think about the area of presenteeism and absenteeism. Presenteeism, or Chico, but you're not 100%. Some people they are 100%, but instead of doing their work, they do Facebook. That kind of person, it's not a health problem, it's a disciplinary and performance management issue. You've got to manage his performance. But let's assume that he's there 100% and he's healthy. He's not healthy. This is the impact of, here we make a distinction between the green is years of life lost. That means if years of life lost, you are dead. You're not working. But the next one, the yellow one, is years of life with disability. That means you might still be alive and working, but your effectiveness has dropped. So where you have a greater yellow, it means that there can be the higher the yellow, the higher the likelihood of high presenteeism or high absenteeism. Do you get my logic? You understand what I'm saying? Where you have the yellow, because it's years of life with disability, it means there's a higher likelihood of presenteeism or absenteeism. So for different kinds of diseases, you can see in some of them, what's it called? Other NCDs, wherever, anything to do with mental conditions, the presenteeism, the years of life with disability is quite high relative to the years of life lost from the disease. Can you see that? The other thing that I want to mention to you is that the World Health Organization has estimated that mental health is going to become the second highest killer disease in terms of morbidity, in terms of making people not fully functional by the year 2020. That's the estimate for all around the world. So it's showing that this presenteeism is going to be present in all of the disease, but for some of them, it's going to be higher in terms of the years of life with disability. These are slides of neglected tropical disease. Since I'm running out of my time, I just show this particular slide. This slide concerned me when I looked at it because it's showing, you probably can't see the numbers, but let me just point out the numbers here. At this particular, at the around of age of 40, here's the age of 40, at around the age of 40, the rate at which we begin to lose people jumps up dramatically, 40 to 50 to 55, 60. These are where people are in their prime. That's where we're losing people. So that's a big challenge for us. It's when the people at their prime, like my age right now, 50, I'm 53. This is the time. I'm lucky that I haven't died by the people that were passing away at 40. But a concern for us, when you reach your prime, when you're at 40, when the time you have the most to give back to your organization, that's the time that people are dying. So that's going to be a challenge and a concern for any organization. Some other stats that I have here for you. Once again, great concern. Not for the future workforce that you have, not for the current workforce, but for the future workforce. Just look at these startling facts that we have here. The big jump that we have. This is the nutritional status of our children. for the year 1993, underweight, when they looked at our children, male, the proportion of those that were underweight was 76.1%. 76.1, and overweight was 14.1. By the year 2004, look at the big jump from there to here. We managed to reduce the underweight from there to there, but look at the big jump in those that were overweight from there to there. Can you see that? Same thing has happened for the females. Slight drop from there, but look at this one, 26 to 44. And notice another thing, 44 is a bigger number than 30, yeah? You get that, eh? These things notice the other thing. This is not a very long period. Can you see that? 1993 to 2004 is only how many years? 11 years. In only 11 years. In only 11 years, that is more than doubled. This one. From there to there, that's more than doubled. Can you see that? It's very frightening. It's very frightening. It's something that we need to think about. What do we do to try to make sure that less people are getting overweight and all of this? It always goes back to all those basic functions. When I saw this slide, I was very concerned with it. And I think it's something that you should be concerned about. All of us should be concerned about in this country. I have about 10 minutes left, eh? Eh? I think these things are... And the other thing is, at the end, I'm going to talk about the need for us to have some interventions. Eh? I think you can tell where I'm going to end up. I'm going to ask you to do some interventions where you can in your workplaces. But I think it's also important when you have interventions to have targeted interventions. I was having a meeting with some of my health colleagues the other day, and I was telling them, you know, normally in the area of business, when we look at a market, we segment the market. Right? We have that particular market, the young, eat-okay person living in urban areas, got a salary of 30 to 50,000. What are his likes and dislikes? Then we design products and services, and we design a way of marketing that product directly for that particular customer. We segment the market, then we focus our efforts. Also, the same thing that one needs to do when we're looking at addressing these diseases. You can't have the same way of addressing diabetes to the whole population. Why? Because their attributes are different. Attributes are different. Like, for instance, some of the things that I found in these studies, that the STEP survey is a survey that's done to look at the impact of all of these things. Look at this, some of this, for instance, current smokers are usually eat okay, while daily smokers tend to be endophagian. The number of standard drinks consumed per drinking day was approximately twice as much for eat okay than for endophagians. So there are not just, sometimes when you amass the statistics of the whole of Fiji together, we lose the subtle differences between the groups that make up the whole. Because when we come up with intervention strategies, we should have strategies that address the whole, but you should also have specific strategies that address the different populations. You find that in Fiji, the mortality rates are different for the different ethnicities. Are we okay? We drink too much. We eat less vegetables than our Indo-Fijian friends. We eat less vegetables. Did you realize that? We drink more, and you know what? Our mortality rates are higher. Mortality rates are higher. So we need to take into account also these differences. I don't know, if you do your studies of FHRI, does some studies across your whole range of your members, you might be able to identify some differences in your total population so that when you can come up with some interventions that are focused on different segments of the workforce. You get the point I'm trying to make. I think it's good that we have these interventions that we try to address for the whole country, but we also need to target interventions, look at the characteristics of certain parts of our population and address the interventions specifically for them. Yeah, see, some of these ones here I talked about. Indo-Fijians reporting eating large amounts of vegetables. Kenton eat okay, sayang. You know, problem with us eat okay in vegetables, we don't know how to cook vegetables. When we go vegetarian, all we do is boil it. And the belly is soggy and nobody wants to eat it. My grandkids, they don't want to eat it. We need to make, you know what we need to do? We need to make good food exciting. We need to bring glamour into healthy food. Today, the glamour is in Coke is okay. All the other stuff. Huh? We look at all this food. Oh, there are some Cokes that are good. Eh? We look at all this food and we think that that is the glamorous food. Our challenge today is to make good food glamorous. That's something that we try to do at the Ministry of Health. We produce a booklet called Kana Ka Kana. You have copies? Get in touch with the Ministry, I'll give it to you. It's good food. How do you get food that is good? Get green food that when you eat it, the texture is there, the taste is there, visually it's appealing. Sometimes when you have vegetables, you open the pot, it's just liquid and a few sort of half-dead things floating around. You don't feel like eating it. We need to make food exciting. There is a low rate of overall physical activity, and here are the least active. This, once again, I'm talking about targeted interventions. Least active, women. Hey, this is the study. This is not John Osmati. Don't blame me. People aged above 35 years, those living in urban areas, and Indo-Fijians. So it's just, these are what the stats are saying. I won't go into, I think the other thing, a few things that I'd like to highlight, very important for us. You know, they say, you remember, oh, that's my grandson at the back. You remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? You remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? You have the basic things, then you go up and you go up and you go up. So normally, as you get into society, the first thing that you want to do is to make sure you got enough food on the table. Then you start to building up, and as you meet more of your basic needs, the higher level needs become more important in your life. And that's what's happening too in Fiji. That's what's happening around the world. As you're finding now, 1990 World Report has indicated that 5 out of the 10 leading causes of disability. Now, disability means the person is still working. You get it? That means if the person is still working, presentism happens when people have disability. Can you establish the link? Disability, presentism. So this is where your presentism is going to come in, from mental problems. That means you as HR people, you must be very concerned with mental issues. As people meet their basic needs, their higher level needs, mental things are going to become more important. 5 out of 10 of the leading causes of disability, in other words, presentism, are coming from mental areas. Now, look at this, the second one. They account for 28%, more than a quarter, of all years, not days, years lived with disability, but only 1.4% of the deaths. That's where your presentism, that's going to be something HR people must target. Mental health problems are going up. Depression is globally the 3rd leading contributor to global disease burden. And here in Fiji, if we take the ratios that are shown worldwide, that about 13% of your population should have mental health issues, and then we look at the number of people that present themselves to St. Giles Hospital or to our mental health clinics, we find that a very small number presenting themselves. That means, the last statement at the bottom, the treatment gap in Fiji is estimated at 89.7% for those with severe mental health problems. That means, what I'm trying to say, according to these ratios globally, if we apply the ratios globally to Fiji, 89% of those that should be treated for mental problems are not being treated. They're keeping it to themselves. Not keeping it to themselves. That means we must find other ways of trying to draw them out or trying to establish ways and means by which those mental issues, that anxieties, that depressions, or whatever that they face, can be dealt with, whether it's in their community or in the workplace. Because that's going to be something that's going to become a greater challenge as you move into the future. The other change that I think that we need to think about, not now but in the future, our dynamics of our population has changed. Have you seen diagrams like this before? These are called population pyramids. Population pyramids for 1996, you can see here from 0 to 4, about slightly more than 10% of the males was in that age group, and females was above that for the age group of 5 to 9 and so forth. So you can see our pyramid in 1996 was a very broad brace here and going up there. As you go up to 1996 to 2014, you've noticed that the percentage of our population in this young age group, for instance, now this was more than 10, now this is only up to 10. So our base in terms of our young is going smaller. There's a smaller percentage that are young. But you notice, so that's happening at the bottom, and at the same time, you notice too that the width of at these age groups, 60, 64, so forth, these widths are getting bigger. So more of our population is becoming what? Older and living longer. As people become older and live longer too, for the health ministry, that is a concern, because as people become older, they become sicker. And when they become sicker, they go to hospital more often, so you have to spend more money on looking after them. Right? Okay. That is the picture that we have so far. I think this is data from, I can't read that. Oh, okay, that was the projections in that particular year. Then I had another set of data that I looked at here. This is from the UND population. And it is looking at the data on the left for Fiji and the data for Australia in 2010. In 2010, this is what Fiji looked like. In 2010, this is what Australia looks like. So you look at Australia, their population for the young people is lower, but they're very big at the top level here, and it goes up. The projection is that by 2050, Fiji's population will begin to look like this. So we will have an older population. You then also need to think, what is the impact of that on your business in the future? Our population is going to be older. There's going to be a changing demographic. For us as Ministry of Health, it means a greater concern with issues like NCDs, because they tend to come when people are older. Right? NCDs tend to, even though the problem started when they were 20 or 15 by eating the wrong food and all that, they come to fruition when they are 50 and 60 and so forth. So that's going to be a concern for our Ministry of Health. But also in terms of you, in terms of your workforce. This is another area that we have to worry about in the future. Climate change. Climate change is going to affect the health of people. As the climates become warmer and wetter, what happens? Mosquitoes breed all over the place. With mosquitoes comes what? All kinds of disease and all the kinds of disease that come with that. That is potentially going to have an impact on us. Disasters are going to, they say the disasters are going to get worse. That will also lead to all kinds of health problems. Sanitation will be an issue. In some of our countries now, the water table, salinity has gone into the water table, so that's affecting their source of water. And when something affects your source of water, it affects your whole body, your whole health issues. Water supply, more mosquitoes. Climate change is going to be something that is of a concern to us. In the Ministry of Health, this is our wellness matrix. This is our rainbow that we use. We believe that there's two things about this matrix that I'd like to stress to us. You probably have seen it before. Dr. Isimeri Tukana is our advisor on wellness. He's always talking about it. He says, everybody goes through it. You cannot do anything. All of us, as it just says in the good book, there's one day that you are born, one day that you are die, and you all go through this transition from baby to infant to toddler to child to teenager to adult to senior citizen until you fade away in the distance and you pass away, or you just dissolve, disappear totally. You cannot do anything about going through this change. The only thing that we can do as human beings is to worry about what we can do about these ones here. About what we think, about what we breathe. Sometimes I used to breathe the wrong thing before. Instead of oxygen in, you put carbon in. That's a problem, that one. Thinking, what you breathe, what you eat. This is what you can control. You can't control this, but we can control this. And this is what we must control. Thinking, breathing, eating, what you drink. What do you drink? You must drink more water, more mbu. Don't drink stuff that's not good for you. You must move. Move. It's better even if you're just doing nothing and you are reading a book or just watching TV, it's better to be standing up than sitting down. Just by standing up and watch TV, that's better. Oh, when you watch TV, just do something like this. That's better. You must move your body. Move, move, move. You must also rest your body and reproduce well, all the proper ways of reproducing. That is the message from the Ministry of Health. Don't take me wrongly. Reproduction is normal. You have to reproduce. That's part of life. But this, I think the important message is this. There are parts of life, sometimes we worry about things that we cannot do anything about. We are going to get older. What we should worry about and the things we should focus our attention on, and which we want HR experts to be focusing on, is all of these things. what people are thinking, how they're thinking, all of this. We should have interventions that help people to make the right choices in each of those areas. I think this is probably too detailed, so I want to go into that. And now, our whole approach in the Ministry of Health now to this problem of NCDs is that we want to have a setting approach to try to deal with people in each of their settings. And one of the most important settings that you'll find there is the workplace. Most of us spend, how many hours do you spend at work? A lot of you probably spend more time at work than you do at home with your family. A lot of the people that work for us do that. So there's so much that goes on. It's such a great proportion of people's life. We need to make an impact on how they spend that time at work. The environment that they work. First of all, occupational health and safety. It needs to be a good environment. It needs to be able to work in things into that environment so that they can be happy, so that they can live better, so that they can try to control the aspects or the issues that impact on NCD. So workplace is so important, and I encourage all of you, human resource practitioners, to focus on these areas and come up with interventions to help those that are your current workers and those that will be our future workers in the future to make sure that they can live a better life. I found this particular slide. I thought I'd bring it along before I close. There's a document produced by the World Health Organization framework, WHO framework on guidelines for health in workplaces, and it tries to make the business model, the business case in a nutshell. Talks about unhealthy and unsafe workplaces. This is in relation to OHS, work-related stress leading to unhealthy personal health practices, example, smoking, drinking, overeating, lack of exercise, leading to chronic non-communicable diseases. And at the same time, when you have workload stress, it tries to combine all the areas of health and also OHS issues and makes the case that if we manage this, if we don't manage it well, what it leads to is things like business failure. It provides everything in a very good diagram. And you can see workplace issues and disease issues have an impact on these things that we were talking about earlier today. Absenteeism, presenteeism, short and long-term disability, and other areas like health and insurance. So it's a nice business case made for that issue. I think I'll end here by saying that health is a major issue in this country. You're all human resource people. You know your stuff. I think one of the first things that you must do, if you want to manage health, if you want to manage anything, what did I say before? If you want to manage anything, you must first measure it. If you want to manage the health of your workers, you must first what? You must screen them. Hopefully you can, I don't know whether a lot of you are doing screening. Our wellness people are ready to come and help you do your screening. They're outside today. All of us today, they're somewhere. But where are they? They're somewhere around here. Make sure all of you get screened today. Make sure you look at the result, and if you see something that you don't like, make sure you decide to do something about it. Make sure also that you get your staff screened. And make sure that you make it an imperative that those that you see that are well, your priority is to keep them well. Keep them well. And those that are at low risk, your priority is to make sure they don't become high risk. Now, you can't do it, you can't force them, but at least you can have programs, you can advocate, you can give them information, you can set up clubs and other things to help to keep this workforce healthy, the current workforce healthy. And I also encourage, what did I have there? Keep them well, prevention, curative, rehabilitative, also the address absenteeism and presenteeism. And I think also, they are at the bottom, need targeted interventions. The last thing that I'll say, because I think I've outrun my time. For all of us as human resource professionals, it's not enough just to focus on your current workforce. I invite all of your companies to also start thinking about our future workforce. Our future workforce. We start now to, in terms of corporate social responsibility, becoming involved. And I know a lot of you are already doing this with our communities in helping them, educating people to eat right, to drink right, to think right, to activate themselves rightly, so that in the future we can try to have as great as an impact as possible on the healthiness of our population, so we can keep this country moving to what it should be. Ultimately, one day it will once again become the way the world should be. Thank you very much.